So this morning we have LeeAnne on the show from Acumen Performance, and your last name, I'm just not going to butcher it. Is it Gullett?
It's Gullett. Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
I was
Yeah,
like,
nailed it.
I might mess this up, but LeeAnne Gullett from Acumen Performance, they are up in Canada. They are leading the way in strength and performance training along with rehabilitation in professional rodeo athletes of all calibers in the Northland, and they're doing great stuff. So we wanted to have her on this morning and kind of just chat it up about what they're doing with their athletes. Also, they have the first published study about rodeo athletes in the Strength and Conditioning Journal, which is super exciting. Like beyond
Gives me
fires me
goose.
up.
I literally get goosebumps even when you say that. It is.
It's
It's
so
really
cool.
cool. It's a cool thing.
It is. It's I mean, it's you're created a path there. Like you guys are you're create or what's the word I'm looking for? Like cutting the path out.
Hopefully.
You're you're a pioneer of y'all's of everything in this sport, which is really cool to think about, and it's a lot. But when we look back in 10 years and 15 years,
That's just it.
y'all are going to have the first study, and you're going to be the ones that started this on paper, which is, man, it fires me up for you guys. It's so cool. It's changing the whole
Yes.
sport. It's changing the game. So we'll kind of get into what that study entailed, what it looked like, how you guys got your information, and what the results were. But kind of just give us a background of who you are, what your where you came from, how you got into rodeo. If you didn't come from a rodeo family, what made you fall in love with working with rodeo athletes?
Yeah. So I grew up in southern New Hampshire. I live in Canada now, but yeah, I grew up in the States. I grew up on a small farm, and when I met my husband, who actually like r really grew up on a farm, he now tells me that I did not grow up on a farm because there was only 5 cows. So I realized now that it was more like a friendly farm. I showed 4-H, and that was like the extent of my agriculture background. I'm not a rodeo person by all means. I would say obviously I'm more into it now. My undergrad is in athletic training and health science. I primarily worked with baseball and hockey. And then I got my master's degree in exercise physiology at Mercyhurst University. I worked Division One hockey as an athletic trainer, taking care of injuries, etc. I moved to Canada. I was not certified athletic therapist in Canada at the time, so I actually worked in orthopedic research for shoulder surgeries and knee surgeries for 2 years, and then I moved to Edmonton, and I got in touch with a shoulder surgeon through the place that I was working in Winnipeg. And then when I moved out here, I knew rodeo was really big. I had previously been working with your brother Duck,
Yeah.
and he is pretty much the reason I really got into this sport. Obviously, his wife Paige had a big role in that too, because I had lived where Paige was living while she started dating Richmond, and we started talking about this sport, and I'm just like, holy, there are some crazy demands here. And I've always had an appreciation for any type of sport. I worked with a lot of baseball. Pitching is just like one of those mechanically outstanding abilities from an athlete. So I got really into the shoulder and treating the shoulder. Um, and then I got into hockey, and I'm just like, hips, man, their hips are crazy strong. This is impressive. Again, the mechanics of it, I always had an appreciation for that, and really getting athletes back to like a returning state to be able to output so much force and not get injured again. Then I'm looking at this rodeo, these athletes, I'm just like, I'm researching on it. I'm looking at, how many G forces horses are putting through. I'm looking at the impact that athletes are taking on their necks. And I'm like, I'm boggled. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, and there's not a lot of research on these guys. And they don't, let's face it, I've been working with Richmond 6 years, 7 years ago. And,
Mm-hmm.
and even back then, it was like,
There was really nothing.
maybe some guys trained,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and I'm like, there's a big role here for selfishly studying these athletes
Mm-hmm.
and learning more about them and what they're capable of doing, and how do you train for something like that? You can't mimic half this stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you train for something so hard on the body and sport longevity and coming back from injuries? How are you able to like say give the okay to like, yeah, you can return? um on that note, if rodeo athletes have taught me anything, you can return from surgery a lot sooner than we can. That's a different subject. But really, I just started diving into the strength and how to train, and what feels good. What is the other thing I thought was really interesting? I'm like, okay, when's your off season? There's no
Yeah.
off season.
So
There
what?
really,
Yeah, we
yeah.
off season. We
What do
don't
you
do that
mean?
around
I'm
here.
I'm working with sports that are like, yeah, I got these months off, let's work on this, or I got these months. Then you're working with rodeo athletes, they're like, I might have like 2 or 3 weeks here or there.
Yeah.
And I'm just,
It's like, how do
okay,
you? Yeah.
okay. And they're gonna do it with or without your help. So you just try to help them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I got in, originally got into it. And then when I moved to Alberta, um, Richmond put me in touch with Brandon Tommy, who's executive director of the Canadian Pro Rodeo Sport Medicine team. So I reached out and I'm like, hey, I've been, looking into this. I'm a certified athletic therapist. I'd love to help out. So now I cover for this rodeo events and PBR events in Alberta.
Dude, that's awesome. That's really,
Yeah.
really cool.
So that's just kind of how I got into it and how it's grown.
I love it. It's literally pretty much mimics our journey so far as well, minus us already being in rodeo. But I had an injury myself and realized there was this huge gap in any kind of preparation physically for athletes. And then the rehabilitation side is like, I was going to PTs and they were like, oh yeah, you're never riding a horse again. You're not going to do this, that. And you're like, okay, so you don't understand the sport or anything, obviously. So that's not going to work. So it's cool to hear how far it's come. And, 6-7 years, that's a good amount of work, and to see how the developments happened. And, when you're mentioning like the off season, in season stuff, the sport is so different than anything else out there. Even the PBR has way more breaks than the PRCA guys or the guys in the Canadian professional rodeo are going.
Yeah.
So, they can follow more of like a traditional sport schedule, right? Where they
Mm-hmm.
are able to actually train Mondays and Tuesdays, maybe a Wednesday, and then have some mobility leading out or just some maintenance, whatever. But
Yeah.
these rodeo guys were like, we're getting down with the NFR, and all of us are sitting down masterminding, like, what are our programs going to look like? What are our goals for these guys? And then we got this beautiful 12-week thing mapped up, and then Fort Worth hits, and it's just out the door. We're
Yep.
back to a summer run in the middle of the winter, and it's like, okay, how can we continue to increase strength, yet get them super and keep them competitive throughout that little, I don't know, it's 2 months, and then we have here
Mm-hmm.
another 8 weeks of, it's not off season, but the really elite guys are taking that break, right? Most of them,
And that's if
some
they're
of them are
staying
not.
healthy.
Yes.
Like, and then if they're getting
Yeah.
injured, then you're changing it based on that.
Mm-hmm. Constantly changing.
It's like this. It's
Mm-hmm.
not this.
Nope. It is
It's
anything
not
but that.
linear. It is
No,
not linear.
it isn't. So I
I'd
like
like to
that.
say like we are starting to, and I'm just saying like again, we're just starting to figure these things out too. Like, we're trying to get, that's the other thing. You try to get a schedule and then they're adding rodeos or they're adding PBRs and people are entering, but I think the guys are starting to realize like load management a little bit more, and
Yes.
when to take time off, when to not take time off, and those things. So I think it just depends on the athlete too, and where they're at, what their goals are, if they're feeling a lot of pressure, if they're able to sit back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think that all plays a role too.
Man, that's right on the money. And earlier you said, how these things are making the athlete feel. And I think that's so important, because so many guys, especially as someone new to training, right? Minus the sport, actually getting in the gym and working out, they have this, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Thought, damn it. what's the word? Damn it. They have like an impression that they need to go ham in the gym. They're going to recreate that intensity in the gym every workout, right? And
Yeah.
you're saying, paying attention to those loads, being more aware of what those are actually doing to your body and where your body is at that time is super important, because if you're feeling wrecked, you don't need to go to the gym and and try and hit these max lifts or these max intensity pieces, because your body's literally telling you it needs something different, right? So
Yeah.
getting them to listen to, hey, I understand you want to go hard. I know you have big goals, but sometimes that working harder is just pushing us back, right? We need to work a little bit
You bet.
smarter.
Yep.
So I think that's really, really important for anyone that's listening to take away from this is listen to your body. It's all about the individual. You see Richie or Casey Field or whoever doing their thing. Cool. There might be pieces of their stuff that you can take, but that doesn't mean that you're doing their exact program, because you guys are not the same people.
Not the
Everybody
same
is
at all.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's really, really neat. So I want to go back to like baseball players, hockey players. You've had a lot of work with both of those. When you
Yeah.
see, in comparison, like other sports in rodeo, are these same overuse injuries happening in other sports? Like, so, I don't know. You just see it so much in rodeo, especially in the hips and the groins. I feel like we see the
Yeah.
groin always in trouble if we're not paying attention to. I think if we're not paying attention to mostly abducting, I think we're in a constant state of adduction so much that we get weak on the abduction side, and then everyone's like, "My groin's hurt," and they do all these groin exercises, and nothing
It's like
happens,
you're
right?
still overloading
Yep,
them.
yep,
Yep.
exactly. So, what have you seen in other sports and anything like comparison to that?
When I was doing baseball's an easy one. Obviously, you're running into shoulder overuse,
Mm-hmm.
elbow injuries, and um, a lot of that is, you're getting pain anterior shoulder.
Yep.
It's an immediate red flag for us. So we go posterior. So we're working the rotator cuffs. Um, we're I'm going to add treatment in there because obviously I'm a therapist, and my philosophy is treat and train. Everybody's always feeling beat up, so I always want to treat somebody before they train, make them feel
Mm-hmm.
good, kind of reinforce the treatment. And we started treating the hip very similarly. You get guys that have that anterior hip pain or
Mm-hmm.
the groin pain. Well, we're going posterior. You're working hamstrings, glutes, abduction.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, it's my groin that hurts. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to treat your groin, make it calm down because it's firing so hard and it's working on overdrive because your ass and your hamstrings, sorry, just where your ass and your hamstrings abductions aren't strong enough
Mm-hmm.
to support, the hip extension that you need. And there's sometimes a tough buy in there because they associate pain with weakness or
Mm-hmm.
tightness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually not either of
Right.
those. It's either that might be an overuse or the other muscles aren't strong enough to do what they need to do. So we notice that a lot. It's hard to relate again that those things to other sports
Yeah.
because they really are
So different.
different.
Yeah.
We're on land, we're on ice. These
Mm-hmm.
these guys are on
Air.
livestock. Yeah,
Yeah.
air, exactly.
Yeah.
And against a much larger force.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I would say similarities as in, you have your common overuse, your rotator cuff, anterior shoulder pain, um, and then your hip flexor, groin pain. Say it all comes a little bit hand in hand, and
Mm-hmm.
but how we work on it is a little bit different on the rodeo athlete.
Oh, that's really cool. Really good information. Um, when you said it's a hard buy, we run into that regularly with guys, and they're like, "We have to do what? We have to do the opposite of what's hurting." It's like, yeah, it's like it's not strong enough, right? And you're never going to know that if you're not a professional in what we do in the fitness
Mm-hmm.
industry or rehabilitation or anything like that. You wouldn't know that if something is hurting. A lot of times, it's the opposite thing that is causing that, whether it is being overused or is just weak.
Yeah,
So start paying attention to your body in those ways, and you'll usually problem solve a lot better.
yeah.
So even myself, when I start getting tight hip flexors or tight in my lower backs, I'm like, usually
Where
it's because I'm
else?
tied up in my top parts and I'm rounded forward, so everything is just kind of getting pulled that way or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. But yeah, good things to notice and good things to pay attention to as a rodeo athlete. Let's jump into this study, because I think
Yeah.
this is the coolest thing going down the road so far, especially in our industry. You had a good handful of athletes, and you tested a good range of events as well. It was
Mhm.
different for, it wasn't just a bareback riding study or whatever. You guys had bull riders, bullfighters, all the things. So can you kind of go over how you set it up, what the intention of the study was, and then
Mhm.
what you guys found from it?
Yeah, so again, kind of like my interest in, I grew up, we had preseason testing for all athletes. Um, and whatever sport it was, that was for everybody. And that was to say where this athlete was on comparison to elite athletes. So, you have your soccer, you have your, excuse me, you have your hockey players, and that their groin strength should be at a certain number. The NFL combine is a huge one. That people are supposed to run whatever dash at this time. Like that shows you that they are an elite athlete. Like that is just what we call normative data. They need to be this strong. They need to be this fast. They need to have this much power to be an elite athlete. Let's be honest. If you're way below those numbers, you're probably not making it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So we want normative data to say what is an elite rodeo athlete? What qualifies you to being a really good rider? Or I mean, we tested all rodeo athletes, but I think the study primarily focused on bareback, bull riding, saddle bronc, and we compared some bullfighters as well. Um, so we just wanted to accumulate normative data from rodeo athletes and see where their strength was. That could tell us maybe a little bit more about the sport, what you need to work on, what you need to focus on, and just to put some numbers out there. I think, again, when I think back to why we did testing in other sports, a lot of it is, yeah, put you on the map. Where do you fall? Are you testing really, really high? Are you like the Connor McDavid? That's definitely a Canadian reference. Are you the Connor McDavid of the group, or are you, subpar? So um, that's a big reason for it, but also return to sport. So if somebody's, ran into an injury, we have groin testing on all the guys. If they run into a groin injury, okay, well, let's test your groin out, see where your numbers are. Are you
Mm-hmm.
below that 17% threshold? Do you need some time off? Do you need to rehab? Because I will tell you what, numbers go a long way for a rodeo athlete. When we test them and they see numbers and they're like, oh,
Oh.
I like that's a lot weaker than
Mm-hmm.
my other side. Or they see the numbers, they visualize it, they're like, okay, I need to like take care of this.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the time they don't want to take care of it. They don't want to take the time off needed. They want to keep riding. They want to keep going. But if one thing I've learned from a lot of this testing is that numbers go a long way with these guys. So um, as much as it was awesome for the research purposes, it's really good on returning guys to sport and retesting. And then their confidence going back to the sport, back to their event, they're like, okay,
I'm
I'm
ready.
back. Like I'm strong. So they're more confident going in, and they don't fear re-injury as much. So that's been really helpful.
That's awesome.
Um, really just hoping to tell us what the differences were between the sports. I think we all know bareback kind of takes the cake on as far as physicality goes,
Yeah.
and the numbers did kind of show that like they really need to be strong in certain areas, and they are.
Mm-hmm.
They prove it. um and then I think like that was our main goal for it, is just to
Mm-hmm.
accumulate a bunch of data that shows what type of athlete needs what.
Mm-hmm.
And we've actually tested over 100, and I think we're almost at like 120 athletes. But back when research takes a long time, like you you accumulate it, you write it, you run the tests. So back when we first started it, it was just 43 athletes. So now we have more, and our hope is to continue the data, accumulate more, because when you have a smaller sample size, you see some results, but they're not necessarily what we say significant. Is it a large enough gap to be like, yeah, this means X, Y, and
Mm-hmm.
Z. So we're close. Sorry.
Good.
So I think as we grow, I think we'll hopefully come out with more research that says, bareback specific or bull riding specific. And I think long-term goals, and maybe I'm ambitious, is a lot of like adding in motion capture onto an athlete. And even in here, we've had spur boards in, we've had accelerometers on guys' legs, looking at speed, motion capture of the horse as well. And I just think that's a whole new, that's like big picture, right? And we're just starting here, and it is cool that it is the first study of its kind. There's lots of stuff on injuries, but how are we supposed to prevent these injuries when we know nothing about their bodies?
Absolutely.
So this is our starting point.
That's awesome. That's really awesome.
The testing to itself, I think, is how we're going to go into.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
So when deciding what test we were going to use, we were trying to think about what has already been researched that we can compare to your other athletes, your soccer, your hockey, your basketball, because we kind of want to compare. Like, I want to show that these rodeo athletes are badass and strong, and they're athletes. And you got to train like one. So we tried to use tests that are out in literature already, testing other athletes, but also some that were a bit specific, more gauged to the rodeo athlete, which again is very difficult. But again, kind of looking at your hip abduction, adduction. We did a straight leg and a bent leg hip abduction, adduction, just to kind of mimic, extension and flexion positions. Neck, we added in, obviously, for rodeo athletes and concussion and neck injuries. It's a pretty studied one, but I think it's really important for the rodeo athlete. And then, the others were just trying to compare other sports eventually.
That's really cool.
Anecdotally, I'm comparing in my head, and I'm like, man, you got 145 pound bull riders that are squeezing adduction strength close to a 200 pound hockey player.
Yeah.
If not more, which is
wild.
Quite impressive.
Yeah. That's wild. I think that's kind of why we maybe see those injuries so much, right? Those overuses, because those little bodies are exerting so much damn force through them that they're just maxing out, and if they're not doing the things to keep everything balanced and strong, you're going to run into those overuse injuries more often than not. But that is wild to think about, especially when you stack them next to each other and look at them. The 200-pound guy could legit probably eat that little bull rider, And so it's cool to hear that the strength, and man, I just think that just goes back to the grit of rodeo athletes and how tough they are,
So that's it too. Like, we were testing one day. I love this story. We were testing rodeo athletes at one of the camps, and somebody got injured in the States, and he came in his Wranglers and Long Johns, and I'm like, can I throw you on the force frame? I just want to know. Where you're great bull rider. I'm like, I just want to test. And he's like, sure. Hates working out. Gets on the force frame, squeezes, sets the record of the day. In his no warm up, Long Johns, Wranglers, like, he's like, oh, is that good? I'm like, oh man.
High score. What's that mean?
Did I break it? Yeah. Did I break it?
Oh, that's awesome. But it just goes to show
natural strength.
Yeah. Well, you think about the culture coming up, like, when you get into rodeo, like the guys that are mentoring you are like, oh yeah, you got to eat, sleep, and breathe it if you want to be good. And so what do? Like, I mean, they eat, sleep, and breathe it. So, little kids are riding the armchair couch, or the armchair on the couch. They're squeezing their little ponies out in the yard. Like, they're doing everything they can to mimic the sport from an early age. From the time they get introduced to it, they're already trying to work on those things. And they only work on what they know, though. And so, groin strength, core strength, like those things being probably the two main things that they are at least aware of that they need. So they're well adapted for those types of movements because they've been doing it from day one, probably every single day.
You know, Paul, that's super interesting because, a big controversy in other sport world is long-term athletic development. And when is it good to individualize in sport and stop becoming a multi-sport athlete? And there's a lot of research. Again, I use baseball as a reference, but they say you shouldn't specialize in baseball until 14, 15 years old. And then after that, when you're a pitcher, you are supposed to take 3 months off total a year from throwing, like no throwing at all. And 2 of those months have to be consecutive. One of those months can just be kind of spread out. So when you think of that and how early these kids are starting these mechanics, are they playing other sports? Maybe, maybe not. I would say being a farm kid is right up there with playing other sports.
Absolutely.
But yeah, time off is a big one. And then these kids are specializing probably way or earlier than other sports.
Oh, beyond. I mean, and that's part of the parents in it, and that's not the parents' fault because there isn't a ton of information out there either for parents getting kids started, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to change as well. Is
educate,
like,
just educate, yeah.
How can we educate people? How can we say, hey, maybe having your kid be a mini bull rider and only ride bulls from the age of 8 and thinking he's going to do that for his entire life is not feasible. Because, well, first of all, he's 8 years old and he's probably not going to like it anymore after you forced him to do it that much. Second of all, it's just good to get a kid needs a variety of athletic experiences as he grows. That's what makes you an athlete is getting experiences and everything. So I venture to, I think gymnastics is a great thing for young kids. I think that, soccer, baseball, play all the things, make sure, you have a good variety. You become an athlete then. And then if you want to be a rodeo athlete, and especially in the rough stock, not to put down the mini stuff, but we're not very big fans of the mini associations where these little kids are getting on mini bulls and mini horses. I get that it's the culture and everything, but there's a ton of junior rodeo associations that have awesome events that are not putting their little bodies that are developing in these positions that can really get them hurt. And then in the end, they're not developing any kind of fundamentals in the correct way, right? They're just learning how to stay on and hang on for dear life. And so I always said, like, if I could go back and ride bucking horses again, I would do everything I did, but I wouldn't get on till I was 18. I would do the spur board. I'd do practice. I'd wait till I was strong enough.
Let your body. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's, anytime an athlete walks through here, they have a eval with an athletic therapist. It's kind of like a red flag screening. What hurts? Test the rotator, like test your body, get some numbers so that you performance test so we know how to train you. Do you need more speed? Do you need more strength? What hurts? What do we need to balance? That's how we write programs. And then one of the questions I always ask, did you play other sports growing up? And you can tell, I swear, they start warming up and you can tell, oh yeah, you've played sports. Oh dear Lord, you haven't played sports before, right? And I think all you guys are in agreement where we're training these guys to be an athlete, or girls to be athletes, to move well, to have some body awareness, to have some balance. Like I said, I've never been on a bull. You guys have that. Like, I've never been on a bull. I've never been on a horse. I don't know how to do that. I'm looking at hip extension, hip flexion, knee flexion, like shoulder external rotation strength and stability, core strength and stability. That's how I'm looking at it. And I watch ride after ride, and I'll talk to the athlete, where do you feel like you're behind, or where do you feel like you need? And they'll usually tell you. They know. And I think it's super important to just, I love the background of multi-sport or just doing other things other than rodeo.
Absolutely. It's only going to make you a better individual all around, I think. Get so many more experiences and things like that. I want to get back to that rest thing that you were talking about, with the baseball players, which I think is so important. And again, not a standard in rodeo, but I think now we are seeing, I don't think guys are saying they're intentionally doing that, taking those breaks, but I look at Casey and he rodeos hard in the winter, goes to the big ones, usually does very well, goes home and doesn't go for like 4 months or 3 months until June. And he's just training and getting ready. And then he shows up in June after all these guys have been going for the last 4 months, just trying to get a spot in that top 15. When, yeah, it matters, but it really doesn't matter until June or July through September, right? So he's showing up fresh, and all these other guys are tired, worn out, and using their muscles
Battling
too much.
something.
Yep. And so they get 3/4 through the season and they're going home because they're hurt. And these other guys have taken the time to take care of their body and realize that the inner part of them that's saying, you need to go, you need to be on the road. Like, you need to be winning money, spurring horses, or else we're never going to make it. Because that's an easy spot to get in when you're like kind of a little self-sabotage. But when you take the other side of that and look at it as, I'm putting in the time, the effort, I'm going to be so strong mentally, physically, all of these things. And these guys are not when I show up, you know? So I'm going to be able to take advantage of that. And I think just changing that mindset is a huge part of that. And the mindset that you're changing is that your body is the business, right? You are the asset. Like, if your shoulder doesn't work, your groins don't work, you can't ride bucking horses or rope or do any of that.
Right.
So taking that thought and saying, okay, instead of being a cowboy and having to push through this, let's really evaluate where I am. And that's why I think those numbers that you guys have on the testing is so important, because it's not just me saying, dude, you're weak. Like, this is weak or this is hurt. And he's like, no, I feel fine. Like, okay, I do a test.
I can work through it. Yeah.
Yep. And everyone says I can work through it. Every rodeo athlete.
Or they tell me I'm going to take 2 weeks off. And in my head, I'm like, biologic, that's not going to heal. And that doesn't work. Okay, let's test you out and see where you're at. And then they're like, oh, okay, now I'll listen to you.
Because it's tangible at that point. They're like, like that was way worse. Okay, I need to actually listen. So I love that, because there hasn't been anything like that for rodeo athletes. We've been trying to do that as well with our evaluations. We run an evaluation on rodeo athlete or not, they're getting evaluated by us, and we're finding out where they are as a person and individual. Again, one of our questions, have you played sports in your life? What is, how many years, what did you do? Because it matters as we could not see somebody move, and just that answer to that question alone tells you a lot. Like, okay, this person's probably going to be able to move pretty decently or have an idea of what's going on. So I think that's really, really important and so cool. And it's really refreshing to hear, because as you know, this area is growing in our sport. There's more trainers popping up left and right, which is awesome. I think it's great. We've been, from the very beginning, I've always said we're definitely not the only coaches, but there are a group of coaches out there doing it right. And that's what's really important to me. I don't care where the training comes from, just as long as it's pushing the sport forward, right?
You got it. Yeah.
There's a big mixed bag of what to do and what not to do. You see guys that we talk about and say not to do, but y'all have been doing everything right since day one. This is why, I've known that since Richie started with you all those years ago. So we are extremely excited to see what else comes from y'all up north, and we definitely need to make it up to a camp here now that
yes,
I know you guys started that was like COVID and stuff, and it just got so weird up everywhere. But now that it's not, and I'm moving to Montana, moving right next to Richie.
So my goodness,
we'll be a lot closer.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
it's only a 10-hour drive.
Hey, rodeo people, that ain't nothing. That's easy. That's just
right.
Let's go.
True. That's so true.
Only group of people you could say 10 or 12 hours, and they're like, cool, let's go. What? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's nothing. We used to do that all the time.
Right.
Well, LeeAnne, thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think the biggest thing is, 7 years into this, and we're still learning. We're still figuring things out. As much as I want to say, like, oh, yeah, I have it figured out. If you have hip pain, here's this protocol. If you got this, there's this protocol. But we're still figuring it out. We're still, we're diving into things a little bit more and more. We're pushing guys out of their comfort zone, doing things like, honestly, Mike Kisia, he's super smart. And sometimes I see him working with a guy, I'm like, that's like, why haven't I thought of that? That's awesome. And implementing it is super important. And, I think what's good is that there's a trust built now, and people trust us. They'll listen to us. They'll try things out. And I say communication is key. If something's not working for you, or if you feel something that you don't think you should be feeling, let us know. Tell us, because I can't help you if you're not telling me that something hurts or it's not improving, or if we try something out that's outside the box, they're like, this is dumb. And we're like, yeah, but think of it this way. And they're like, okay, we'll try it out. It's been a lot of fun, and these guys are such amazing athletes, and I really hope there's more of appreciation for it, right? Like, I think things in the next, even like you said, 10 years, like it's so superficial right now, and in 10 years from now, it's gonna look different, I think. And coaches like yourself, and as it grows, play a huge role in all of that.
Heck yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the sport is definitely headed somewhere it's never been, and once the world finds out how badass rodeo athletes are, I think that there's no stopping the popularity of it. And especially just the world, I think, is in search of kind of authentic people, real people. And when you get these guys that can do incredible things as an athlete, but are so down to earth, and you can go talk to them and they're just so real, it puts a whole other spin on everything. And I think people are really wanting that in today's world. So I think that the future for rodeo and the rodeo athlete looks extremely bright. And like you said, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, we're seeing a ton of success as coaches and with our athletes all around, like y'all are. But when we sit back and look, it's like, dude, we're just getting started. Like, we're definitely still figuring things out. We're still testing things out. There's still things that pop up in a season that I go into, like last summer, I'm like, all right, I've done this for 3 years, summer runs with guys. Like, I've got this down. Like July, I'm like, oh fuck, like, I need to change something. I need to adjust some things. So
that's what makes good coaches. You have to. You got to.
Absolutely. So it's so cool to hear, and we love what you guys are doing up there. We'll definitely be in touch with y'all, trying to do maybe some collaboration stuff, because we've definitely got some access to athletes and would love to, help kind of get those stats in the books and expand what you guys are doing. But
absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming on today. How can people find out more about you and Acumen Performance?
Follow me and Acumen Performance on Instagram. And we have a Acumen Performance website. There is a rodeo landing page. That's pretty much it.
Sweet. We'll link those in the notes, in the show notes. You also, if you want to check out LeeAnne or Acumen, you can go ahead and click the links in the show notes. We got to thank our sponsors, Beastmaster Rodeo. They are providing the top quality gear for all rodeo athletes. Best customer service out there. If you guys need anything, you can use our discount code CHAMPIONLIVING, all one word. It is going to be caps locked. Going to save you 10% on all their products. Beastmasterrodeo.com. Y'all, until next time, we'll catch you later.